The vision of building the boat like this required learning a bunch of new skills. One of them, welding. We can no longer just rivet the hull together because of this boat being what it is. The goal is for this boat to reach speeds approaching 50 miles an hour with up to 6 people in a full load of gear. And it will do it with only that 115 Yamaha behind it. But the amount of material going into this 2070 John boat is obscene. If we don't frame it right, the performance will suffer greatly. Here's what we did and how we did it. Quick reminder that the lid system we're putting in here is our very own house dry hatch system. It is a full 1/8 inch thick aluminum lid that sits inside its own dry track for framing. You can stack them together like puzzle pieces as long as you frame in the hole size correctly. You have a list of options and a list of different sizes, even rear facing 3-sided hatches. You can get your latch holes pre-drilled, have latches added on, and even get them powder coated, all black. Check them out below. Alright. Time to figure out how to weld for good. This will be my first real major project. Welding, I think I got it. But I definitely have my design down. It is this. We will be notching aluminum and stacking it together flush like this. It's a design that can only be done with welding and can't be done with riveting. I tried. This is 1/8 inch angle, and I used a small portaband to cut and notch out those pieces. The 6061 angle, it was pretty tough for that little thing. It's only made for soft metal, but the 6063 architectural grade 1/8 inch angle, because there was a concoction of it here, I had to get whatever the metal store had. That cut a lot better. So let's talk about what it takes to get into welding aluminum. A good entry-level welder for anybody to use is a welder with a spool gun, which is the same process as MIG welding, only the aluminum wire used to weld is so soft it can actually travel up the cable shroud like standard steel MIG or flux core wire can. So there is an exception to that, and we'll show you that in a second, but if you want to know the easiest way, you would get a welder just like this one. Prime Weld comes highly recommended by my shop out of the Southeast for being a really good starter welder for people to learn on really good high quality spool gun, and the unit itself is very high quality, and you need an argon gas tank. With those things, you can start welding aluminum today. The bigger Prime Weld unit next to this smaller unit is actually a TIG welding unit, so you can learn to TIG weld, and it might actually even be better if you can figure it out. Because the gun is smaller, it can fit in more tight spaces, the lead is generally longer, you just got to get in there with a rod, and the process to learn it is harder, and it does take longer, but the welds are stronger and they look much better. Anyways, let's get to it. The bulk majority of this entire boat framing will be out of 1.5 inch by 1/8 inch angled aluminum, which you can get generally pretty freely from a metal shop. They should carry it. A lot of them even just deliver right to your house. And there will be sections where 1x2 and 1x1 square aluminum tubing will also be added. In fact, some of it is already added into the boat before I even got it. And as far as the other exception to the rule, there is something called a push-pull MIG gun, which it pushes the wire and then it pulls it at the very top like a spool gun would, and you get all the versatility that a MIG gun offers in terms of getting in tight spaces, and it also comes with a 25-foot lead, so I can walk up and down and all around and inside this boat anywhere, and that would be really hard to do with a standard unit that has a spool gun with what, like 6 or 8 foot lead. Wouldn't be possible. And also that spool gun, they do sell pro guns for like professional welders like this Miller, but the spool gun is always flying around and getting everywhere. So to avoid that, I just spent the extra money. Plus this unit has a pulse option, which slows things down and creates an actual better weld. I'd actually say that the Millermatic 255P with this push-pull MIG is the best starter welder for aluminum for anybody. It's just unrealistically high in cost, and so that's why it's not the best starter. But I have a buy once, cry once mentality, and I did cry when I bought it, but now looking at it, it's going to be the one thing that saved this entire project. And the hatches themselves drop right in. I framed them in a little tight. You kind of want a little bit of a gap for, I guess, play. I tried to gap them as close as I can so it could minimize the gap in between there. If you want that gap gone, you'd have to butt 1.5 inch next to 1 inch, and then the hatches will butt up completely. But they still sit really good in here right now, and you can see everything's free floating on top. Perfect time to start adding under supports up and down and framing in the compartments themselves. The under supports will also be angle. If we use tubing, it would defeat the whole purpose of doing it this way. Is tubing welding it all together and making it the frame stronger? Absolutely, tubing is way stronger than angle. But this is definitely strong enough, put it together into a T-frame, and there is no voids. With tubing, it's really hard to avoid voids. Like right now, if I stack those tubes together like that, then you would have to sheet metal on each side of those tubes, and there would be a 1 to 2 inch void every so often between the tubes in every section you did. So those voids actually add up and create a lot of inefficiency and a lot of just wasted nothingness. It actually makes the boat a lot harder to work with. But with the angle, there will be no void, so you will get the max space out of each compartment, and you will just avoid all the nothingness that happens with tubing. So we welded the live well completely in here. It's completely free floating, completely 100% welded in, but the lip is covering it, which is good because welding at that angle was not great and it was not pretty, and I would have had to do a whole lot of refinishing work, but these hatches are already finished, so as long as it's flush and nice and not looking like this, then it will just, that's the beauty of Nate's hatches. They really do just clean up very nicely. I'm just saying, this is like my first big welding job. Like, besides this, the only thing I ever welded to was like parts of my boat over there and a few little accessories for my office, but those are not load bearing and outdoor functional like this thing. But we have it in there. Not that we'll be running another 6 probably down here. And down here, I'm not terribly sure how we're gonna do it in here. I was thinking, because it angles bevel. We got away with it over here because that was completely level with the subfloor right there. And over here, we're hanging a little over. So we'll likely have to do it just a slightly different in terms of how we seam it, like for a crease to stick sheet metal on. All right, let's make good on this whole core frame by sheeting in the compartments. I really want to use 0.050 or even 040 aluminum sheeting. I just don't know how long or how well that will stand up with people who use this boat, what kind of abuse it's going to go through. It definitely is supposed to be an ultimate outdoors boat, so probably a lot of more abuse than the average boat. We're going to go ahead and give it 0.063 aluminum sheeting inside the compartments. Bridger's back to work with me again because he called his other boss a bitch.
No!
He got fired again.
That's not true at all, guys.
Welding is awesome, but definitely not everything needs to be welded in a boat. So when you can use rivets for a cleaner, flusher, much more hassle-free look that is going to just do the same thing. Like, we put 1,000,000 rivets into that little bottom floor and definitely into all the spines of the subfloor. We're going to do the same for all these other sections. Riveting in sheet metal does take a while though. Just be prepared, like clear your schedule. Whether it's the deck or it's compartment sheets like this, it takes a long time. I can't tell you why. To make it, that needs to be cut off. There are many times that I regretted not just sheeting the whole subfloor. I mean, laying and standing and sitting in here, I think I almost broke my ankle 1,000,000 times between those ribs, and just, it was super uncomfortable to work on. But the whole reason I weighed off on that and only sheet metaled it in once it was all frame was to cut down on the total amount of actual metal added into the boat, because like I said, it's a tall order. There was also a lot of fails in this whole project. Like, there was a lot of grinding off and re-welding, and then some of these things have been re-welded like 4 times. I conspired with all my other friends who actually knew how to weld and talked me into getting this machine, showed them my welds, and they're like, nope, grind it off. Nope, it's too hot. Nope, it's too far apart. Nope, there are pits and craters. Do it again. You need to turn the gas up higher. Nope, it's too cold. That weld's gonna break the first time it hits a wave in the water. I think I picked it up eventually to be good enough to where the welds may not look the best, but it was definitely a solid, strong weld. And then toward the end, when I had to make welds that were going to be seen by the general public, that were out there, I finally had a good enough rhythm to where they were not only strong, but they actually looked decent for whatever you could get out of a spool gun. Definitely, if you TIG weld everything, it looks so much better and is a lot stronger, but it's a lot harder. I'd have to get another welder for that, and then a long lead, and I was just like over it all, so this is what I chose to do. With all the problems I had, I was very concerned the whole time whether or not I'd made a critical error in thinking I could just pull this whole thing off and just figure out welding in one project. Hey ladies and gentlemen, if you think this channel is useful and helpful to you, please give it a like. That way it's useful and helpful to others, because that allows YouTube to share our videos better. Anyways, on to the bigger mess. This boat had tubing welded to the gunnels. Not only did that look bad, but the gunnels were also not in great shape. How did I choose to fix this? I got 3/16 inch by 2 inch aluminum angle. I slotted it all the way down so it would bend. Each of those slots will allow me to slightly bend this, and I do mean slightly because 6061 aluminum is very hard and it's meant to shear before it will bend. So you get it by slotting it, and on the very crucial points where it has to really bend on that big taper right there towards the front, you have to heat that up with a torch to get it soft. Once it's soft enough, it will bend without breaking. What you just saw was the beginning of the light boxes. So we did the exact same method for the light boxes and the side gunnels here. The new gunnels with being 3/16 inch thick, That being as thick and strong as it is and also being bend proof will help protect the light boxes we're about to make. They're pretty intricate, and if any sort of failure from the driver happens, which, you know, it happens, we don't want those gunnels to bow in. We want it to just bounce off and take the hit and then not dent and further damage the light boxes. I also found out later that welding it like this with really long, thick, consistent beads is really bad. You're supposed to tack weld it and then go 1 to 3 inch runs every so often, and then keep repeating the cycle, going back to front and back to front and back to front until the whole thing is filled up to your specifications. I wanted the whole thing to be welded to the entire gunnel, making the whole thing really solid and never ever to come off. But yeah, that how I did it just straight from front to back in one sweep was not great. I did have the obvious notion to clamp it to keep it from warping, and that's the only way I actually pulled it off. But apparently, you know, I know people are gonna comment on this. I just want to let you know before you comment on it, I already know. Also, before it came to me, there was some work, and part of that work was this whole light gate, light fence, light rail. I don't know. I cut that stuff up though to make light boxes, but I chose to frame them in. I talked to a lot of people. They like to bend them out of sheet metal and fabricate them that way, and I think that would have been a much easier way. But I know people are going to try and stand on these and lean on these and do things, and they're probably going to run into a few walls. And when that happens, a solid tube frame will hold up a lot better than bent sheet metal. Also, it's going to house multiple things. It's going to house 2 sets of lights, the initial lights and then LEDs to light up the boxes. Behind it's going to have to be a double wall. It's going to house all the power supplies for the actual lights themselves. There's a lot of stuff here, and I'm just not going to be able to accomplish that with just bending sheet metal. I would have to frame in stuff anyway, so why not just do the whole thing the way we need to do? We have the initial wall kind of set in place. We have to take it off because we're not even close. We're a little ahead of ourselves right now, but just want to do it for looks. Hey guys and gals, if you're wanting to frame, deck, wire, and rig a boat from start to finish and the general public videos are not enough for you, we do have exclusive masterclass videos by becoming a YouTube channel member or finding us out on Patreon, where we have the same videos but a few more exclusive perks specifically for patrons. Check out both and see which one's best for you. Anyways, when I got the boat, the back deck was already framed and it was all the way to the top of the gunnel. We're talking, these are like 30 inch from the bottom to the top. That's how tall this boat is. It's extremely wide. It even has 2 side rails. That's how wide it is in the back. To fix this, I mean, we have to bring something from the transom, which is only like 21 inches, 22 inches, all the way to like a 30-inch top. We got to do something here. My only solution, honestly, is to turn these pods into a staircase. Make another stair right there, that way it leads up. The stair will lead right into the end cap, so we're going to have to make the end cap part of the stairway. Then we have the transom as a leading part of the step. We're using thin aluminum over this because we have pretty good framing underneath. Just a series of rivets, we'll finish it off. The second one was done much better once the first one was completed, and it was definitely a chore to learn how to weld thin aluminum and keep it from bowing and doing its natural thing. The process of learning how to weld until you got it right was terrible, but the more you did it, the more you realize that you can pretty much make anything if you can weld. Pretty much everything you've seen so far would have been impossible to rivet or braze together. But when it was time to use rivets, we did, because it made sense. Like, why end up welding something that you can accomplish with rivets if it's not going to be something that you absolutely need to weld on? The back actually took a really long time. It's just a small spot there. I swear that took me a long time to do all that. And little did I know that this was the least of my problems, and it was going to be like this pretty much the entire build. No matter what we did, it seemed like time would just deplete in front of our very eyes from basic tasks. Just look at this. Look at this time lapse. Here we are. My son is riveting in that compartment, and he's just, look at the sunlight. It's going, gone. Where did it go? That was our whole day. And the whole time he was just riveting in sheet metal panels for those stupid compartments in the back. The original plan was to make that big open void in the back a spot for the generator to freely just breathe and flow, but the more we did research, we found that people were putting them on platforms because it was quieter and better just for stealth reasons. So now we're going to frame the generator platform, which is very similar to a polling platform, but for generators. Prior to this, I made brackets. I welded them on in the front and back. Right there you can see where the platform kind of drops in, the main supporting studs. And then I just kind of clamped around and I kept looking at it. I looked at it like 10 times, then finally made tack welds and finally just executed the decision slowly but surely. Once the main beams were in place, we made supporting beams that you could climb up like a ladder of sorts. Vertical welding is for the birds. It took forever to actually get a good clean weld. I swear I welded and grinded off and welded and grinded off, and finally I got a pretty good deal. It's solid. All I can say is that that thing is solid. And then later on we painted it, so whatever. By the way, I bought one of those flame-proof like blankets, like weld blankets. I stuck that right over the outboard, otherwise there'd be a bunch of burn holes in the cowl. Once we got this done, we can now add some gussets and some support beams, some side beams, and ultimately top it. And we did frame the inside once it was off, so you see all those lines that are crossed where he's drilling and riveting. Those are the actual support beams, and that's 0.090 sheet of aluminum on the top, and this should be plenty strong for the generator. There were some problems though with the vision of this boat. For one, they framed it like this, but they had the console there, and I don't know what they think they were going to do by trying to reuse that console. There's no place for it, as tight as they made the cockpit. And also the target top. They didn't account that raising the deck all the way to the top, you would have to be a very short person to be able to utilize this target top without making something else. And these are unfortunately things that the owner would not let go. And I mean, I either had a choice, but like, look, you played it out wrong. The parts you got are not going to work at all, and I'm going to have to fab new stuff, and I don't want to do it. Or, you know, option 2, which is just do it. But at this point, I need help. I mean, I'm just new to welding. I'm not skilled enough to make a console like that. I had a buddy, Josh Amos from High Shoals Boats out of Georgia. He hooked me up with this Alaskan style center console, and I don't know what I would have done without him. And also for that target top, we're not going to find something in the mainstream that is going to be able to fit all the deviations we did to this boat. We're essentially going to have to raise it up. On top of it being taller, it's going to have to also be low profile, because look how much room we have to work with right there. So I did what I always do. I sat there and I lamented about it and then thought of a solution. The solution was to use 1x3 by 1/8 inch aluminum rectangular tubing. It's the only thing I can think of that will be strong enough to stand alone up there like that, but it'll be low profile enough that it's not going to ruin the whole design. And I'm going to modify it in such a way that I can use the original top from the target top and make it work, because I don't have the tools or the skill to bend tubing the way this was. And the one thing it is, it's elegant, at least on the top. Everything else was a little sketch. It should be actually in theory a lot stronger because of what we're using. The other framing for the target top wasn't terribly confidence inspiring with how thin the tubing was. This actually opened up many more possibilities. I ended up buying another stick of that 1x3 and putting it so it's pretty much like a tubed angle fitting around and framed right in front of the console, and it became incredibly strong right there. I can ever see it swaying, especially with the cross beams. And then we were able to add brackets and bars to mount things, because he had a tall order of stuff and gadgets and electronics to come into this boat, and there was absolutely no way he was going to be able to ever mount any of it to be accessible unless we did something about it. So this ended up setting us back quite a bit of time to do this whole deal, but the benefit from it is exponential. Rigging this boat will be its own separate video, but here's just a little few things, the speaker and the fish finder and a few other things, just for reference of why we did it. Oh man. Okay, if that tarp makes it through this storm, then it's legit. It's shaking all over the place right now though, so I don't know, but if it makes it through this like 60, 70, 80 mile an hour wind, then I guess I was wrong about it. Normally the framing is the easiest part of the whole thing. It's the fastest going and the most confidence inspiring. You feel like you actually did something. But this took a very long time. And a lot of it was because I had to weld outside. I figured out a few tricks to bypass the wind like this, going under a weld blanket with a mask on and then being able to fix some. That did actually help speed up some things versus having to wait for calm days, because there was like only 2 out of the whole 7 days in the week that were calm during this time. We had like record storms and winds and a bunch of other crap that happened, but it was whatever. Nate, the famous master builder from Tiny Boat Nation Outdoors Midwest, came all the way down here from Illinois to fish. I made him help me finish this boat, kind of. Dang, look at that. That's pretty precise, just minus that. You know, this boat was a gigantic pain in my you-know-what, and I don't really know if I would ever want to do this again or say yes to anybody, but I'll tell you what, it is coming out pretty epic. I mean, the storage compartments are massive. You can stick people in them. They'll hold everything. This thing is totally rigged to make everything super comfortable for a large amount of people on it. It'll be extremely stable. Nobody's gear will be in the way. I just have to finish it all up. For all the deck sheets that Nate cut out, I had to rivet those all down and then weld all the way around again. And this time I did it the right way after, you know, my guys told me how to do it. And then that was definitely important, because that aluminum was way thinner than 3/16 and it would have just warped and caused all kinds of problems. And let me tell you, out of all the things that waste obscene amounts of time for no actual reason, I cannot think of anything more time wasting than riveting sheets down to a deck. And it's specifically the sheets and also the sheet metal inside the compartments. I swear I spent all day riveting one compartment. I don't know what it is about it. You'll be in the moment, you'll be thinking you're working fast, and all of a sudden, like, it's the evening. It was terrible, but whatever. The end result was pretty epic, I'm not gonna lie. We're about ready to turf. We got the aluminum pretty clean. We're gonna go over it one last time with alcohol. There's a lot of overspray, so we had to hit it with acetone and smeared everything. We cleaned it with a water vinegar mix. It was actually really good for cleaning aluminum and actually really good for cleaning soot off aluminum if you're welding. The ends are prepped. We're ready to lay this turf. It's right there. We got more of it in there. We're gonna turf this big bad boy and gonna move on with life. We got it all framed and decked, so the only thing left to do is turf it and then rig it. The rigging is one big monster of a task, and I can't wait to show you all that nonsense. But the epic thing is to turf it with our brand new TBN House Color Hydro Turf. You guys can check this out right now on our website. Get it, so that way when the next video comes around, you can just go ahead and install it with me. See you guys out there.